Hello there, omnes. Welcome back to Let's Talk Latin. So for today's video, we will be digging into Chapter 1 of Latin for the New Millennium. Now, I will say, beginning of Chapter 1 does cover parts of speech. I recommend you watch my Latin Basics video to get a better idea about those when moving through kind of quickly. What I've done for this chapter to help solidify some of the concepts is I've actually taken quizzes, daily quizzes that I've developed for my students and built them into the lesson so that you can do a little self-practice as well. So, Chapter 1 of Latin for the New Millennium covers parts of speech, qualities of nouns, the nominative and accusative case, and first declension nouns. Those first 3 points we're going to cover in today's lesson. So, I've already talked about parts of speech in my Latin Basics video, but if you didn't get a chance to watch that, just a quick reminder that parts of speech are like noun, pronoun, adjective, adverb, verb, preposition, conjunction, and interjection. These are the same as they are in English. They're the same sort of concepts. We're going to go through them a little bit, but not too much, okay? We'll get to them when we get to each particular thing in Latin. But in terms of naming the parts of speech, go ahead and you can pause my video now, take a second, see if you can name those 8 parts of speech, and I'll come back with the answers in just a second. Thanks for unpausing me. Let's take a look at the answers. Our parts of speech, excuse my poor handwriting, are noun, verb, adjective, adverb, preposition, pronoun, conjunction, and interjection. A lot of these things will just be introduced naturally when we get to them, but this chapter, we're actually going to focus more on nouns. Nouns have 3 qualities, okay? Qualities are these traits that nouns have in Latin, and every noun has these 3 traits in one way or another. The first is gender. So your options there are masculine, feminine, and neuter. As I talked about in my last video, in my Latin Basics video, some nouns have a more obvious gender, right? Like a father, a pater, is going to be masculine. A sister, a soror, is going to be feminine. But other words that in English we wouldn't say have a gender do have a grammatical gender. In your textbook, you will notice that your vocabulary always lists a letter after it, M, F, or N, for whether the noun is masculine, feminine, or neuter. Every noun has to have a gender, so please learn it. It's super important. It's one of those things that my students come back after a year or 2 of Latin and they go, I really should have done that when you told me to do it at the beginning, because learning genders is important. The second quality that nouns have is what's called number. Your number has 2 options, either singular or plural, okay? So think about the difference between dog, singular, and dogs, plural, okay? In English, we usually just use an S to kind of make that distinction. In Latin, there's a lot of different ways to make that distinction, and we'll talk about that in our next video. But for now, our last quality is called case, and that's what we're going to be focusing more on today. What is a case? How does case work? Can we get some examples of cases? All of that coming today. There are 5 common cases in Latin, and there are 2 less common cases. Okay? We'll talk about this more in depth in just a second, but basically case is how a noun is used in the sentence. In English, it's just about where it is in the sentence, right? There's a difference between the girl kicks the ball and the ball kicks the girl. But in Latin, it has to do with the way the words look. So we'll get into that. First with gender, though, your dictionary entry, like I said, is going to tell you either with an M, an F, or an N, whether you are masculine, feminine, or neuter. So if we take this word from your chapter, puella, puellae, F, that F stands for feminine, okay? Also from your chapter, nauta, nautai, we see that M means masculine. Now the words look the same in their endings. They both end in A in the first one, AE in the second one. How can one be feminine and one be masculine? Well, think about this. We're talking about ancient Rome. When we're talking about nautai, sailors are naturally going to be men at this period of time. So that's why the word is masculine. And then something we didn't see in this chapter, but that we'll get to in a few chapters, are neuter nouns, like this guy, templum, templi. And you see that N stands for neuter. This is what your textbook is going to tell you. Please, whether you get flashcards online, whether you write flashcards or make your own, know the genders. Use the genders. It's important to learn them now so that later, when we're really using them full force, you don't have to relearn a bunch of genders of words you already know. Like I've said, people have natural genders, okay? Senators, for instance. Again, we're talking about ancient Rome. A lot of times it's really easy to say, well, nowadays you can have female senators. But in ancient Rome, senators were men. So the word senator is masculine. Wives, on the other hand, are going to be feminine because they're women. So here we're going to have our uxor, our wife, is going to be a feminine by nature, okay? Learn your genders. I beg of you, learn your genders. They're so important. Just learn that little letter after your words. Then comes number, okay? So again, your two numbers are singular and plural. Dog and dogs, right? Cat and cats. Horse and horses. Your case endings, the ending of the word, will tell you whether it's a singular or plural noun. That gets us into talking about case. This is something that English doesn't really have. We have it rarely. So please be vigilant in learning case. And if it's a little confusing at first, it's okay. Because again, in English, we don't really do it. There's like 2 times that we do it. So, case tells you how a noun is used in the sentence. So, whether it's the subject, whether it's the direct object, whether it's possessing something, these are all functions of case. Okay? It really doesn't happen in English, but I'll show you a few exceptions, and that may help you understand a little bit better. Tell me the difference between she and her. You wouldn't say her goes to the store. You would say she goes to the store, right? She is used when we're talking about the subject of the sentence. You wouldn't say, I love she. You would say, I love her. Her is going to be used in other instances, like when it's a direct object. That's a function of case. We don't do it a ton in English, but things like he, him, they, them, even who, whom fall into these exceptions. There are 5 common cases in Latin. We're not going to learn what they all do this chapter, but it's important to learn what they're called. And we'll talk about that more when we get into our next video on first declension nouns. There's a specific order I want you to learn your cases in. Okay? Nominative is the first one. You notice that that's bold because we're going to be talking about it this chapter. Okay? So nominative is first, then comes genitive, then dative, then another bold one, accusative. So nominative and accusative are the 2 we're going to be tackling in this chapter. And then lastly, ablative for those 5 common cases. Now, if you're a fan of mnemonic devices, don't worry, there is a mnemonic device for remembering what order these go in. It's really weird and kind of silly, but never give dogs any abuse. First of all, it makes a ton of sense. Don't give dogs abuse. Don't do that. But secondly, it helps us to remember not only nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative, but the A's don't get mixed up because abuse has that AB. That's why it works in the device to remind us of ablative. That's why it's the second one. Okay, so try to remember that. Never give dogs any abuse, nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative. It'll be easier to remember them once we actually get into learning what they're for. There are also two less common cases that we're not going to cover this chapter and not really for a little bit. Those are vocative and locative. I know they sound the same, vocative and locative. What I want to focus on, though, are the nominative and accusative cases, so let's get into those now. If you read the story with us, you might have noticed that words looked different based on how they were used in the sentence, and that's what this comes down to. Nominative case is the first case on our list. Okay, it's our never, our N nominative, and it's used a lot for the subject of the sentence. So that's what you're going to see it as most. There are other uses for it, but a lot of times you'll see the subject of the sentence being nominative case. That's going to be like where you see nominative case the most. Okay. The subject of the sentence is the one that performs the action of the verb in terms of active sentences, which is what we're looking at right now. So if I say the girl walks, girl is your subject here. If I translate this sentence into Latin, she will be in the nominative case. Puella ambulat. Okay, you see right now she ends in an A. That's going to come up when we learn first declension nouns in our next lesson. Okay, another way that we can use this is what's called the predicate nominative, or what's sometimes called a complement. Okay, this is going to be used with a verb of being, a state of being. And you'll see what I mean when I give you the sentence. Lydia is a girl. Now, Lydia is the subject, right? But on the other side of the verb, we have what is essentially like a second subject, right? It's a descriptor. It's complementary to the subject. It's a nominative in the predicate. So what I like to tell my students is that a form of being, like is or are, acts like an equal sign. Lydia is equal to a girl. Because Lydia is nominative case, a girl has to be nominative case as well. Lydia es Puella. Does that make sense? You have your est acting as an equal sign. If you have nominative on one side, you have to have nominative on the other. And then we get into accusative case. Accusative case is the fourth case. So it goes nominative, genitive, dative, accusative. Okay? And we're going to see this used mainly for direct objects. So what is a direct object? Well, a direct object receives the action of a verb. So, for instance, Jessica carries the water. Jessica's our subject. She's nominative case. But we have another noun in this sentence, water, and it's not the subject. And the verb isn't a form of being, so it can't be a predicate nominative. It must be the direct object. What is Jessica carrying? She's carrying the water, right? If I grab the water is receiving the action of the verb. In Latin, it would look like this. Jessica aquam portat. Now, that A on the end of Jessica, we're like, okay, we saw that with Lydia. We saw that with the Puella earlier. Nominative case must be the ending. But aquam ends in this M. That's different. That's the marker of an accusative case singular noun, an M ending. Cool. we know it's not the subject. And if we remember anything about Latin sentence structure from our Latin basics video, we know that the verb is going to go at the end. So we tend to go subject, object, verb. There's our object in the middle, our direct object, directly receiving the action of the verb. Let's try another one. Luca loves the farmer. So Luca is going to be our subject. It's going to be what case? Nominative case. We have our verb, loves, and then we have the farmer. So we ask ourselves, is loves a state of being? No, it's an action. So the farmer can't be a predicate nominative, and we know it's not the subject. Is the farmer receiving the action of the verb? Is the farmer receiving the love? Yes. So that makes the farmer a direct object. In Latin, Luca agricolam amat. Again, Luca ends with that A, that nominative case singular marker that we're going to learn next time when we talk about first declension nouns. Agricolam ends in that M again. It's another accusative case singular noun. So, that's our lesson for today. I want you to think back on what we covered, and you're welcome to take the video back there and look over some things again. Go through our little mini quiz here. I'll give you a second to pause me, and then we'll go over the answers. Glad to be back. Let's take a look at the answers. The three qualities of nouns are gender, number, and case. Remember your good old GNC, gender, number, case. The nominative case we know is used for subjects. Now there is another use, predicate nominatives, but that wasn't one of our choices, so that wasn't confusing. And for the last one, the three genders, masculine, feminine, and flexible. Well, no, we know that's not true because the last gender isn't flexible, it's neuter. And that is our quiz for the end of this lesson. Whew, that was a lot of work for chapter 1 so far. You did great today. So, I'll be signing off. Volete omnes. I'll see you next time.